The recent Ukraine and Russian war is different. Everyone's talking about it. The world is watching it. It's being fought by soldiers who have never seen combat. And above all, it's been watched by so many eyes that its very conduct has changed because of it. This is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Let me explain it to you. We need to go back to the beginning. In 2014, after the Euromaidan Revolution in Kiev, which ousted the pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych, a conflict erupted in the east of the country between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed separatists. It was a brutal war. It's called the War of Donbass. But most importantly for today, it ended with a ceasefire. That ceasefire meant that while nobody was officially at war, the two sides were still technically not at peace either. There were even reports of continued fighting, but Russia didn't think this was good enough. For one reason or another, they wanted to bring Ukraine closer under their influence again. So in 2021, Russian troops began building up on the border with Ukraine. At first, everyone assumed these were just exercises that later became the biggest military mobilization since World War II. And then on February 24th, 2022, everything started. A blitzkrieg and all-out surprise attack. Russian paratroopers seized Hostomel Airport just northwest of Kiev. They rolled into the city from the northeast and northwest. The defenders were caught completely off guard. By March, Russian troops had surrounded Kiev from three sides and were literally just a few kilometers away from the city center. It was a humanitarian catastrophe. Millions of Ukrainians had to flee their homes, either running away to safer regions within Ukraine or to neighboring countries like Poland or Romania. Others stayed put, sheltering in underground stations or bomb shelters. The Russians were also having problems. They had expected the Ukrainians to collapse in days, maybe weeks, but they were wrong. The sanctions imposed by the West weakened their army. Supplies ran out, equipment broke down, and soldiers got stuck on the side of the roads with no way to fix their vehicles. After a month of fighting, Putin declared that the goal of the special operation was accomplished and that the troops would regroup, but it wasn't over yet. Russian troops continued attacking. On April, a major turning point occurred, the Battle of Kharkiv. It was a hard-fought victory for the Ukrainians, but it showed that the Russians weren't able to surround the city. If they couldn't take Kiev, they wouldn't be able to take Kharkiv either. This practically cut off any possibility of a quick victory. From then on, the pace of the war slowed down significantly. We are now entering what is called the Southeastern Front, which is not really a front, more like a zone where both sides fight for small territorial gains. Entire brigades get wiped out on both sides for less than a square mile of land. The fighting raged on until early September when the situation stabilized. Both sides dug in. Defenses were built, trenches were dug, and artillery duels became a thing of the everyday life. In September, Russia celebrated its biggest victory of the war so far, the fall of Mariupol. The city had been under siege for months. Its capture gave Russia full control over the Sea of Azov and made it possible to establish a land bridge connecting Crimea with the two breakaway republics of Donbass. But soon after, the tide of the battle turned once again. On September, Russian troops lost a key city of Liman, starting a panic retreat across the entire front line. Then, on October, Ukrainian forces recaptured Staromayorsk, completing a full encirclement of Lyman. On November, Russia managed to stabilize their lines, and since then, the front has frozen solid. Fighting continues, but the territory itself doesn't change anymore. In late December 2022, something interesting happened: the liberation of Kherson region. This was the only oblast that Russia had annexed but hadn't fully occupied. After 8 months of fighting, Ukrainian forces managed to cross the Dnieper River and liberate most of the region. However, in the spring of 2023, Russia launched a massive offensive in the east of the country. Their goal was to take the cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and in the end, they succeeded. This was a blow to Ukrainian morale, but it didn't change much in terms of the overall situation on the front line. Russia declared victory and started focusing on holding the new territory instead of taking even more. But Ukraine was already preparing for their own offensive. They needed time for logistics, training, and equipment. And time they got. Russia kept losing territories due to their inability to properly occupy their previous gains. Ukraine also received a lot of aid from the West, especially the Leopard 2 tanks. These were essential for Ukraine's upcoming offensive. Meanwhile, Russia felt threatened by Ukraine's growing capabilities and ordered the construction of the infamous Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which they hoped would prevent Ukraine from crossing the river. But Ukraine did exactly that. On June 2023, the long-awaited Ukrainian counteroffensive finally started. The Ukrainian army attacked along the entire front line. The main effort was focused near Zaporizhzhia. At first, they advanced rapidly. Within a week, they broke through the Russian lines. But then the pace slowed down. Even though Ukraine was winning almost every day, the progress was measured in hundreds of meters, not kilometers. As the Ukrainian troops approached Tokmak, they encountered fierce resistance, so they tried something else. While sending reinforcements to Zaporizhzhia, they opened a second front near Kyiv. Here, too, the progress was slow, but it seemed like Ukraine was ready to wait it out. Then suddenly on September, something incredible happened. Ukrainian troops crossed the Dnieper River south of Kherson and liberated the city of Alexei within days. Russian defenses in the south collapsed. The Ukrainian army advanced all the way to the Dnieper River, completing the liberation of Kherson. The war was far from over, but things were looking good for Ukraine. To make things even better, they managed to do all this without losing any major territory in the east. However, Russia had something else planned, the largest offensive of the war. It started in April 2024. The Russians attacked everywhere. Literally, they tried to break through Ukrainian defenses all the way from Kharkov to Zaporozhye. Their goals were the cities of Slavyansk, but unlike all their previous offensives, this one actually worked. The Russians broke through Ukrainian lines and pushed them back. As we speak, the Russians are in control of several towns in Donetsk Oblast, but the Ukrainians are preparing a... At the same time, Russian troops keep trying to push forward. On April, a group of Ukrainian special forces landed behind enemy lines. They caused quite a stir among the Russians and even managed to destroy some of their vehicles. However, they were eventually discovered and forced to retreat. Since then, there has been a lull in the fighting. Things will probably get heated again in the summer during the Ukrainian... But as of today, the fighting has calmed down. At least that's what it seems, because the truth is Russia's plan has always been to bleed out Ukraine. They can't win a decisive victory, so they are trying to weaken Ukraine as much as possible. This way, they hope that in the end, the Ukrainians will simply lose the will to fight. Only time will tell if it works. And if you want to know what happens next, stay tuned. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.